Welcome to the Human Rights Café. My name is Jacob Sule. When people's rights are tampered with or denied, it means that my rights and yours are being undermined. Hence, we must educate people about their rights. The Human Rights Café is a collaborative virtual conversation of a Right to Live initiative to equip new generation of leaders to know, promote, and protect citizens' rights and dignity of all persons. The conversation seeks to promote human rights, justice, peace, and strong institutions as provided for by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Our goal is to build a nation where peace and justice shall reign and respect for citizens' rights. If you'd like to know more about the Human Rights Café, please join our conversation on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter via @HRightsCafe. Once again, Jacob Sule. Thank you.
Hello, Cynthia. Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Hello, everyone. To our viewers at home, joining from every part of the world, welcome to the Human Rights Café conversation with Jacob Sule. The Human Rights Café is a collaborative virtual conversation of the Right to Live initiative that features legal practitioners working to support and equip new generation of leaders to know, promote, protect, and advocate for human rights and dignity of all persons. As we all know, there are issues of human rights abuses from America to Asia to Africa and to other parts of the world. This conversation seeks to create an enabling environment to raise advocacy and then raise awareness on issues of human rights abuses. Human rights and fundamental freedom should be better tried. But across the globe, some countries fail to accord human rights to women. However, women are often victims of human rights abuses. Women's rights are abused when they cannot participate in decisions that affect their lives and are denied political participation and fair representation. When they are prevented from going to school or receiving health care, when they face discrimination in employment, when they are denied equal rights to own land and properties, when they suffer from violence within their homes, and when they are subjected to harmful traditional practices, such as genital mutilation and horror killing. These are issues that affect gender equality and the rights of women globally. According to Melinda Gates, she said, and I quote, "When we invest in women and girls, we are investing in the people who invest in everyone." On this conversation this morning, I am being joined with Cynthia Mbamalu, who is the Director of Programs for IAGA. Cynthia is a dedicated human and gender rights advocate and development practitioner, a lawyer by profession with an LLM in comparative constitutional law from the Central European University. She specializes in legislative advocacy, human and women rights advocacy, youth leadership, constitutional building, and elections. As a co-founder of IAGA, she has dedicated the past 13 years to development work, specifically targeted at building sustainable democracies, promoting inclusion and human rights. She currently serves as a director of programs for IAGA, and then she is also one of the leaders of the Not Too Young to Run campaign. Leaders at home, please welcome Cynthia on the show. Thank you, Cynthia, for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me. Hello.
So, Cynthia, yeah.
Yeah.
So, Cynthia, can you tell us about your interest in human rights and gender equality?
Yes. Thank you. I think first, as a human being, I should be interested in human and gender rights. And sorry, it's a bit dark. Power just got interrupted, but we're trying to sort it. Some of the challenges of living in the developing world. For me, it's first about being human. And I think over the period of years that I've worked on development work, or even just growing up as a child, and growing up in a pre-democracy era in Nigeria, when we still were under military rule in Nigeria, I saw reports on TV of, for instance, people just go missing for no just cause. I remember we used to live beside this mobile police station, and sometimes in the morning, just looking out of the window as a kid, I would see these military guys forcing citizens to do some frog jumps and do some literally just torturing people. And I always wondered, why is this normal? Someone is just walking past and then they just call them because they are armed and in uniform, and they put them through inhumane and degrading experience. But then that was when Sani Abacha was still the head of state. That was in the 90s. So as a kid, I always felt this was wrong. So I think my interest in human rights was most one of the things that spurred me to read law. And I just felt by the time we moved to democracy, and I remember my dad saying, finally, no more military men, no more uniforms controlling us. And I felt, oh, this must be a good thing, meaning democracy means no military guys, means no military people torturing people for no good reason. But the older I got, the more I also realized that human rights, though we are all humans and we're all born and endowed with rights that are inalienable and cannot be taken away from us, that the state as an institution has not effectively protected the rights of citizens, meaning that in every system, regardless of if it is a democracy, you need to work every day to ensure that rights are protected, because human rights are not self-realized. People need to ensure that they are guaranteed and that they are protected, and that the state by its nature is oppressive, meaning that if you do not have systems of checks, systems to demand accountability, would always have instances where rights are violated. And that means we need more human rights defenders in our world, whether you're in a democracy or not. So if you look at the global reports on the state of democracy released by International IDEA, you'd also see that across the world, even though from the 90s, late 90s and recent years, there are more countries that have become democratic. There's been expansion of democracy, but it doesn't show that human rights are less threatened, because you also see the reports by civicals on the shrinking civic space, and you see that more countries are becoming are creating more threats to the civic space and to the enjoyment of civil rights of its citizens. So what does this show? What does this tell us? That the expansion of democracy, or the fact that the system is democratic, does not really guarantee that rights will be protected. So we need more systems and legal frameworks that ensures that rights are protected and rights are guaranteed. And if I would just extend this to the rights of women, it would just for me, as a young woman, I believe I should have interest in women's rights, because I live the experiences of women. And in our society, you see there's been a historic discrimination against women. So in several movements, be it the several feminist movement, what has been a demand? That women are equal to men. We are equal citizens, that we are humans, we're not less humans. And that every legal instrument on human rights also protects us. However, because there's been a history of discrimination, we need special protections for the rights of women, because across the world, women still struggle against an oppressive system and structures that have been designed by men that did not take into consideration the uniqueness or the peculiarities of women to protect the rights of women. And you need to ensure that systems are reviewed. There's an overhaul of the structures to take into consideration the needs of women. And in that way, protecting women would need a strict enforcement of the rights of women by first having nations, countries recognize the rights of women, the human rights of women, and then ensuring that there are systems to protect these rights of women, to guarantee that women do not face, they are not put in a major disadvantage just because they are women. So for me, the interests for human rights and gender advocacy is we're all humans. We need to ensure that as we live in this world, that our rights are guaranteed and protected, and that no one treats us treat us that we're lesser humans, and that the world that promotes equality of rights, a world that promotes equality, is a just and fair world. But if we cannot have that, if we cannot have a world that promotes equality, then we will always have injustice, and injustice is a threat to our being as humans.
Thank you very much, Cynthia, for that detailed analysis on your background and then interest of human rights globally. Now, can we look at the fact that the Human Rights Cafe is timely with all the activism of the younger generation of youth right now? Do you see the same enthusiasm in which you're carrying forth as a young lady? Do you see such also being instilled in young people across Africa? Do you see is there a change for young people to begin to advocate for human rights, be it gender equality, gender parity, or what do you think should be the way for young people now looking to build advocacy in human rights issues globally?
Yeah, very interesting question. And I'll just give example. If you look at different movements around the world, you actually see lots of young people are taking initiative and taking leadership. And why is that so? Because I think the older you get, the more you realize that, hey, I need to do something because the system is not here to protect me if I don't make the system protect me. So you'd see, for instance, be it the Me Too movement, if it's in Nigeria, the Arewa Me Too, these young ladies from the north who are leading that initiative in the north, demanding for the rights of women. If you also see the conversations around increase in sexual and gender-based violence in Nigeria, the demand for state of emergency on gender-based violence in Nigeria, there are lots of young voices leading that initiative. Even the movement for climate change, you see global youth leaders, young people who are taking leadership globally, challenging world leaders on the need for them to care about our environment and ensure that the world is safe for the younger generation. And so there's a consistency, maybe not in the level that would want it or the rate that would want it. And I think what is lacking most times is the need to start investing in building youth leaders who understand the peculiarities of our world and the need to take initiative. And then also promoting intergenerational leadership, especially within the women's movement. And why is that so? Because you always need the experience of the old and the wisdom, and then the energy and innovation and strength of the youth. You need to create that balance for sustainability and consistency and advocacy. The movement for equal rights for women has been ongoing for as long as you can think of. However, the challenge, the successes or the measures, the progress has not been as we would want that. Meaning, you need younger voices to take on that movement, because at some point people would burn out. So you need the younger people to take leadership. And if I bring it within the continent, you see, there's the African Union. I know the Youth Envoy, the AU Youth Envoy, has been working to get young people to demand for rights and development and youth inclusion within the space. If I bring it down to Nigeria, look at the Not Too Young to Run movement. It was actually led by young people. Because when I talk of young people, I actually look at it from two generations. So there's the millennials and the Generation Z. Now, I'm a millennial. There's Generation Z, those behind me, those born, I think, from 1996. So there's also that shift within generations. And one of the things we wanted to achieve, the Not Too Young to Run, is most of us who started leading the movement were millennials. And the conversation is, how do you get Generation Z, the younger ones, the early 20s, the under 20-year-olds, to take ownership and take leadership of that? And that for me is where I would situate your question. We need to do more in what I will use the term that is commonly used, catching them young, meaning promoting civic and human rights education at a very early age, from as low as babies, from 2, 3 years, 4, 5 years, under 10-year-olds. We need to start teaching them about their rights, so they understand what rights they have as children. You need to start teaching things on human rights, the rights of a child in society, because early education creates an awareness that builds that consciousness for action in a later age. If we don't build that level of create that level of awareness and inspire that consciousness of the need to take action as individuals and human beings of the world, then we will always have a challenge in inspiring that level of action in the later age. So for me, it's also a need to use diverse platforms to reach out to the younger generation, what we call the Gen Zs, Generation Z. They are the next leaders. They are the ones to take up leadership. And we need their voices because they have a longer time to live. Millennials, yes, we do have longer time, but those coming after also need to understand the urgency of now. And I think that is where we need to focus. Lots of human rights education, leveraging on platforms, social media platforms, actually where you reach out to them. In this period of COVID, lots of social media challenges were going on, different challenge for this and this. People were dancing, all of that. And I think those are important tools to reach out to these younger people, meaning we need to start designing challenges on promoting human rights education that would use tools that they understand so that we can inspire their interest to take action. But in a larger scale, there's a lot of work or responsibility for the state, meaning that if governments, if institutions that are created to protect and promote human rights do not see the need to create spaces to educate people on their rights, from as far as making it part of the education curriculum in schools, then there is a question, and it means the state is not thinking of building human rights defenders. So we also need to come from the point of policy review and reform, because if we don't also make it as part of the education system, the learning and character formation and process for the younger people, we would not have we wouldn't have that level of consistency and sustainability that we want across generations. And that's what we need to start investing in. And for people like us, Jacob, myself, and some of us younger people who are working in the space, this is time to also start building mentees, because mentorship is a good form of learning. And ensuring that whatever we have now, we don't let it end with us, that we are reaching out to younger people because we need to pass it on. Whatever knowledge we have, that is the only way we create a sustainable system that can consistently demand for the protection of human rights.
Yeah, thank you very much, Cynthia. I absolutely agree with you that we must create a system that is sustainable, and then we must get youth, catch them young, so that they can also take up the baton from us in advocating for human rights. Then I want to take you to the words of the former U.S. First Lady, Hillary Clinton. In 1995, at the Beijing conference, she declared that human rights are women's rights, adding that women must enjoy the right to participate fully in the social and political lives of countries if we want freedom and democracy to thrive and endure. Now, looking at this statement in which Hillary Clinton has made, we want to relate this to Africa and then to other parts of the world. How much can you say that we have equitable female representation in democratic processes? Should females be given much more representation? And then how best do you think we can achieve this in ensuring that the rights of women, they are not just relegated to the back, at least they have a fair representation in achieving human rights equality? What can you say about that?
Yeah, so this is 25 years plus of the Beijing conference. And 1995, there was a lot of hope when Hillary Clinton spoke, and when when all the conversations around promoting women's rights and all of that women's rights are human rights also. But 25 years plus, and we're still struggling with a world system or a world order where women are still excluded from the political process or from the decision-making processes. And like you said, within the continent, I mean, aside countries like Rwanda, who still is one of the countries with more women representation in their parliament or in government compared to other countries in Africa, we have some countries performing better. I mean, Nigeria is still very embarrassing, because national representation of women is barely 5%. When I say national, both at the federal, state, and local government level. So there is still that major challenge when it comes to political inclusion. And if you read the gender gaps report by the World Economic Forum that was released early in 2020, it shows that it will take the world about 99 point something years to close these gender gaps. And for countries like Nigeria and sub-Saharan Africa, it probably would take much more, because we still have systems that do not promote women political inclusion. So where countries are failing in that, we're not where we want to be. But do we have hope? Yes. There's still hope. because one, at least we have legal instruments. So for instance, in Africa, in 2003, the Maputo Protocol, the protocol on the rights of women as part of the African protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. But that focus, the Maputo Protocol focuses on the rights of women, and several states had signed up to that within the continent. And basically, the protocol mandates states to ensure legislative and policy frameworks that promote women inclusion and women representation in government, as well as obligations to limit or prevent discrimination against women and what have you, and then talking about the rights of women. So do they exist? Yes. We also have the Convention on the CEDAW, Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. So we have legal instruments both at international, regional, sub-regional level. We have that within the country. Now, so where do we have the major challenge? One thing to domesticate, is one thing to sign up to a law, another is to domesticate it. It's easy for Nigeria, for instance. We don't have any, once it comes to legal instruments, amongst those to endorse. But when it comes to practicalizing that within the country, is a major challenge. So for instance, the demand for the gender equal opportunities law in Nigeria has taken so many years. Each time it comes to the National Assembly, it always fails. At the point of second reading, sometimes it gets to committee stage, but does not proceed beyond that. Same also, the Violence Against Persons Act took almost 11 years before it was signed into law, and that was just done recently it was done in 2015, but we still do not have states. So far, only about 23 or 24 states, about 23 states. We just heard yesterday that Bauchi had passed it at the state assembly, so waiting for the governor. So if we add Bauchi, say 23 plus 1 plus states that are 22 states that are yet to adopt it nationally. So we still have lots more states who are yet to adopt the Violence Against Persons Act, which has special provisions for women. Not to also mention the Child's Rights Act, which also protects the rights of the girl child. For that, we still have more states in the north who have failed to adopt that because they have a major challenge with the age. What the Child's Rights Act is to do is to put the age of 18 as the age of consent and the age of marriage. So you have states who want to still continue promoting underage marriage. But so I'm just trying to show where we are. Now, if you talk about representation in government, you would see that we're far away from what Hillary Clinton was projecting or hoping for. Because currently in the National Assembly of Nigeria, out of the 360 House of Representative members, only 13 are women, 360. If you go to the Senate, out of 109, only 8 are women. Now, if you go to the state assemblies, out of the 991 state constituencies represented at the state assembly levels across the 36 states, only about 44 are women. Now, so if you see that when I say national representation, we're struggling with barely 5%. So the question is, why are we still struggling to have women represented in government? Especially for a country where about 50%, because you have 49 point something percent are women, we still do not have women representation in government. Not for lack of competent and capable women, no, but because we have a system that has made it difficult for women to even emerge. So if you talk about appointment also, where the president makes appointment or the state governors, at least that is not the process of elections. Why is it difficult to also appoint women into the national cabinet or at the state levels? So it's beyond just having the legal framework. Do we need the legal framework? Yes, we do, because that mandates the state. But where the challenge is that there is lack of political will by the state, by the government, to ensure enforcement and implementation of what we have in our laws and policy framework. So that is one, the lack of political will has made it difficult for women to even emerge or for women representation in government. The second for me is also the fact that we still have a constitution in Nigeria that in several attempts to amend has failed to take special recognition or provide special provisions for women inclusion. For instance, if you look at constitutions for Kenya, part of the review of the constitution was to provide for appoint elections of women at a particular percentage, so some form of affirmative actions through quota system. Same also if you look at Rwanda, if you look at even Zimbabwe, you look at Tanzania, Uganda. So there are more countries that are taking conscious effort. If you look at South Africa, some of what you have is recognition of rights of women in constitution, but also political parties having special provisions for women inclusion. That is why, for instance, the ANC has a special gender provision. So you see the ANC being the majority, the ruling party, had more women in parliament. So you see the percentage of women in parliament increased. So what is this telling us? That for countries that have special provisions in their constitution that guarantees women representation, it's easier for political parties or the political system to produce or to ensure women emerge as leaders from the electoral process. So that is one of
Thank
the
you very
learnings
much,
from those.
Cynthia. I'm sorry to butt in. Let me quickly butt in. Thank you, Cynthia,
Yes.
for that analysis. So let me quickly butt in. Now you can see across the globe, women and girls have been targeted and exposed to daily harassment and sexual violence in both public and private spaces. Recently in Nigeria, we saw in a place of worship where a young girl was assaulted. Now the question is this: how do we make our cities safe for our girls and women across the world?
How do we make safe spaces?
How do we make our cities safe for our girls and cities across the world, not only in Africa, but then in all the continents of the world?
Yeah, thank you. First, if these law enforcement agencies are not gender friendly or do not understand issues of gender, they will still not understand how to protect women. And I'll use the example of Nigerian police force. So you have a situation where there are reports of violence, you go to make the report, and you do not even have the police take it as an emergency situation to respond to you. So if we do not have law enforcement agencies that have a gender sensitive approach to policing, it would always put women at a disadvantage. So that for me is one. We need to have institutions that are specifically mandated to protect women and understand what it means to protect the rights of women. The other is we've treated the issue of sexual and gender-based violence as less priority for over a long period of time. So for instance, in Nigeria and some countries in Africa, domestic violence is still seen as a family affair. And sometimes rape also comes with a lot of stigmatization. It's just recently that you have, thanks to social media, more people coming out to tell their stories, and social media also popularizing some of these reports to get the government to act. So we need to, within the continent, we need to shift from that ideology or that orientation, that issue of gender-based violence or domestic violence is a family affair one, that issues of rape is probably the victim's fault, because it's always the first thing of, oh, where were you? What were you wearing? What were you doing? But what we have seen is children are being raped. Women, girls are being raped. Be it for sisters, some sisters who wear hijab are being raped. People who are dressed. So it's not about dressing, because regardless of your dressing, it still affects you. So it's not about dressing. It's not also about people being too sexual, because there's also this annoying stereotype of, oh, she had pictures on social media. But what about the babies being raped? Would you say they were on social media also? So we need to stop justifying a system that has enabled rapists to go scot-free and focus on getting survivors of sexual violence to have their stories heard and investigate their crimes, so investigate the crimes that have been committed against them. So that for me is also social orientation, on shifting from the mindset of focusing on what the victim was doing or where she was, to actually focusing on the individual, the perpetrator who committed that crime, and getting that person to order. And to do that is a lot that needs to be done, be it leveraging on traditional institutions to promote education on sexual and gender-based violence, religious institutions, because our religious leaders have a role to play. They shape ideas a lot, especially in countries like Nigeria and countries in Africa where religion is really strong. We need to get those platforms to reach out to people to change this level of social orientation. And then I would always, because I'm a lawyer, I always want to go to the state, because for me, if you don't have systems in place to address this, all you can do is just advocacy and advocacy. So we need stronger and stricter laws when it comes to addressing issues of sexual and gender-based violence, expanding the definition of rape. Thankfully, in Nigeria, the VAP Act expanded the definition of rape to also to also cover boys or men that could be victims of rape. However, there is still less on spousal or marital rape, meaning for women who experience domestic violence, who experience rape from their partners, there's no system to really address that. Because the law still does not recognize marital. So we need to expand that, because within marriages, within relationships, people are being raped and abused, and it should not be accepted. It shouldn't be part of the system. So expanding that conversation on rape, then building stronger. For me, Nigerian police force, yes, is good. The police but we need special units that focus on gender-based violence. Units that are trained and properly funded. Nigeria, we have a gender unit. We also have that in some countries in Africa, either a gender unit or special victims, whatever it is, the nomenclature. But most times, these units are not properly funded. They are not properly equipped with the requisite resources, manpower-wise, that you need to engage on this situation. So if they are not empowered, if they are not properly funded, if they lack the capacity, they can't address the issues. Then better interagency coordination between the human rights commissions that we have in different countries in Africa, between other commissions, be it the Women Affairs Commission and special agencies that address issues of human rights, because that level of interconnectivity would also help the prompt response to victims of violence. And then we also need another system that provides some sort of solace. So for instance, we have survivors who need shelters to either take them out from the places where they were victimized. But most times these shelters are not properly funded, or some level of family support units to provide therapy for survivors of violence. So these are all multi-pronged approach that needs the state to take responsibility to ensure that they exist before non-governmental agencies can provide support to those agencies. But if they don't exist, if the state does not fund these institutions, they won't be able to address these issues, because that is where it all begins with. And then lastly, for me, yes, the state has a role to play, but individuals have a role to play. Every individual, every human being should care about human rights, because today you may not be, there's nothing that stops or protects you from being a victim of abuse or violence. So we all need to take that responsibility to speak up, report violators and perpetrators, protect survivors, and use our different platforms to promote education on how to care about people more, to ensure we promote human rights and young people, because in the continent, young people are over 60% of the population. We have a major responsibility, because we have a role to protect our sisters, our mothers and daughters. If we don't do that, the system will always fail them, and we cannot afford more people going through experiences of violence and not having justice done for them.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. Yes, there's this question from the comment section from Kavita Tana in the UK. She's asking, what do you believe is the role of women in our society today?
Very interesting, because this is a broad question. The role of women. First, I think from our history, most of us have been socialized in such a way that you're trained as a woman. This is how you should be. This is what society expects from you. I think for me, the first role for every woman is to find out who they are. Identity for me is key, because if we do not know, if we are not firm or strongly grounded in our identity, it's easy to be swayed by anything and opinion that comes around. We need to first appreciate and understand who we are, be firm in our identity, and understand that the system was not designed to favor us, but that we have the power to actually maneuver and beat the system to our favor. So for me, that is first, identity. The other is we need to support women more. And for me, support is very important. Is very important. Now, I always make this joke with my friends that if I have a boyfriend who is cheating on me, I would never. I'm not the person to go fight with the other lady. My focus is on the guy. Hey, why are you cheating on me? Most times, society expects you to go fight for your man by. It's as simple as that, by fighting the other woman. But hey, your man had responsibility to you, not the other woman. So for me, the focus when I talk about supporting women is as broad and as simple. Yeah, I called it Ozimo. It's as broad and as simple as realizing that every woman has their own personal struggle. We are fighting a lot against so many things. So we need to the words of affirmation, words of encouragement and inspiration is what we need to start promoting within the female folk, because everyone has their unique struggles, their unique problems and issues. So focus first on promoting women femininity and promoting those things that make us important and special. Let us stop the discrimination against within the system does not help us. So we shouldn't add more burden to women within the society. And then I think every woman should be a feminist. I'm saying this with all sense of responsibility. And because feminism is simply demanding for equal rights for women and equal recognition and equal treatment for women in a society. So for me, every woman should be a feminist. Every woman should care about issues that affect women. And every woman should focus on education and re-education of all those within our space, those our friends, our children, our neighbors, those we interact with. Let's learn to understand and appreciate each other, but also let us learn to support the system, because the fight is not an easy one. However, it's beyond just women. And I know there'll be a next question on that. It's also about men, because I think every man should be a feminist too. Every human being should be a feminist, because the idea of feminism is not women taking over. Most times, I think that's the major threat of fear. It's about women having equal recognition, having equal rights, equal opportunities in the system to make choices and decisions about their well-being, about their affairs, just as a man has the right and decisions and opportunity to make those choices about himself. So that for me is what is important. Our role is to
Thank you very much.
promote women, support women.
Thank you, Cynthia. We have viewers from across the world. We have viewers from the US, from Canada, from the UK, Nigeria, and Kenya. But then there's this question from someone in the US, Melissa Campesi, is asking, what can families do in their different homes to empower their daughters from a young age?
When social orientation begins from the family, family is the smallest unit of the society. And from there, we need to take out this whole idea of gender roles in families. I know growing up, there's always focus of the girls are the ones who help out in the kitchen, the girls are the ones who help out to take care of the home. You know, they're the homemakers. So you're breeding women to be homemakers, but we're not building boys to be homemakers. And that is where the problem starts from. That is where the injustice to men actually begins from. And I think at family levels, that is at the point you need to teach your daughter that she has equal right like her brother. You need to teach your daughter that she can make choices and decisions about herself, like her brother. And then also that she doesn't have not every girl wants to even be a mother. Not every girl wants to be a homemaker. But you need to give them the opportunity to choose their path. And it begins with how we educate our boys and how we educate our girls. What we had generations before now, for most of us, our upbringing was the girl should be more responsible, the girl should be more quiet or calm. We need to teach our daughters that they have a voice at home to question mommy and daddy's decision, to question their brother's decision. A voice begins from home. For those who are religious at home and you call people for prayers, your daughter should be able to lead prayer so she sees that she also can be a leader. If you have family meetings, allow your children to speak equally, both your daughter and the son. Let your son learn to be a homemaker too. Let your son learn to respect his sister and girls, because what you teach a child at home is what they would grow up to live with. And I think if we can start this level of orientation at home, taking away this whole idea of gender roles, and helping children understand that you're equal. You know, you can do what your brother can do. You can dream as big and as wide as you want to dream. That you can be whoever you want to be based on your own, in your own terms and based on your decisions. That way, we have women who grew up with a lot of self-confidence and are independent, and also who see men as equal partners and not as bosses. I think it begins from home mindset, building strong and independent women from as early as from when they are born to make decisions and to take up leadership from home.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. I must appreciate your time in joining us in this conversation today. Now, to the very last question. Do you think there's hope for the girl child and women across the world to have fair and equal representation globally?
Yes, there is hope. We're already seeing a lot of dislodging of patriarchy. We're seeing women emerge as leaders, even in continents. We have first female presidents in Liberia. We have women who are already taking leadership. We had one in Malawi. We have even the African Union chairperson. So we're having more women take up leadership, and they've represented well at different fora. However, there is a lot more that needs to be done because, like I said, Nigeria is still a sorry case. And that's not because we do not have competent women, but because the system is still not enabling that. And so there are opportunities for that. But to achieve or to get to that level, we need to be intentional in putting up systems that promotes women. So, for instance, having more constitutions specifically provide for women representation at speed, and for me, it's gender balance 50-50. Because if we start promoting gender balance, you'd have more women emerge. So that for me is one. Then the way we understand religion. I think as a Christian, there's a lot of focus when people preach in the church, there's a lot of focus on women being submissive and let's focus on men learning to love like Christ did. And I think we need to balance the conversation, balance the sermon when it comes to how we preach in our churches to promote equality from the point of our religion. Even within Islam, I think there's a lot that needs to be done with how religion is framing mindset or informing mindset. Because if we start promoting equality or gender balance, gender equality within our places of worship, you'd also see that in the society, because we know how very religious systems are. But there is hope. More women are coming out, but we need to support women who contest elections. Because for me, it starts from the political system. Support more women as they contest. Let's vote for more women in elections.
Thank you very much, Cynthia, for creating time to join us in this conversation today. To our viewers around the world, we have now come to the end of this maiden session of the Human Rights Café. Like I said, the Human Rights Café is a global conversation, and it is a the Human Rights Café is a collaborative virtual conversation of a Read to Live initiative that features legal practitioners working to support and equip new generation of leaders to know, promote, protect, and advance the rights of humans around the world. And for our guest today, Cynthia is a legal practitioner who has very much interest in gender equality and human rights advocacy. Once again, Cynthia, I'd like to thank you for taking time to join us on this show. And to all our viewers who have joined this show from around the world, thank you very much. We have come to the end of this conversation. Let's keep the conversation going on social media. Tweet us out at #HRights Cafe, #Human Rights Cafe. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Welcome to the Human Rights Cafe. My name is Jacob Sule. When people's rights are tampered with or denied, it means that my rights and yours are being undermined. Hence, we must educate people about their rights. The Human Rights Cafe is a collaborative virtual conversation of a Read to Live initiative to equip new generation of leaders to know, promote, and protect citizens' rights and dignity of all persons. The conversation seeks to promote human rights, justice, peace, and strong institutions as provided for by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Our goal is to build a nation where peace and justice shall reign and respect for citizens' rights. If you'd like to know more about the Human Rights Cafe, please join our conversation on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter via at H Right Cafe. Once again, Jacob Sule. Thank you.